Thank you for joining the webinar. Hi, thank you for joining the Woodland Owner webinar series hosted by My St. Croix Woods, a program of the Wild Rivers Conservancy. My name is Nikki Hanger and I am the Forestry Program Coordinator. We were formerly known as the St. Croix River Association, so we did change our name and our logo is at the corner. The My St. Croix Woods program is a partnership of multiple public and private organizations throughout the watershed whose goal is to provide landowners with the resources and tools to make the best decisions on their land. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to take a few moments to talk about the Zoom software. Please leave your camera off and remain on mute for the entire webinar. You can type your questions in the chat at the bottom of the screen. Just click on that and it should pop up. We will answer questions after the presentation, but feel free to type them throughout the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and a link to the recording will be sent out in the next few days. I also have a survey in the chat box. Please fill out the survey to help us determine future webinar topics and how we are doing. And before I begin the webinar, we just have an event coming up. So this is actually in person. And it is a women's woodland paddle. So registration is now open. It is $50 and we will be doing a 4-mile stretch where you can connect with other women woodland owners and network. So the link is right here and I will also pop that in the chat box. All right, so today's topic will be about forest pests. Our speaker today will be Jennifer Burington, the Outreach Coordinator for the Plant Protection Division of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. She has worked on invasive species detection and management throughout Minnesota with a focus on emerald ash borer over 10 years. Today, she'll be talking to you about what could be bugging your tree. And Jennifer, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. And did the title slide show up?
Yes, it looks perfect.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. You never know. So yes, thanks everybody for having me come talk about some forest pests that might be bugging your trees. So I'm Jennifer Burington, like she said. Angie Anborn is our entomologist here at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture in our Plant Protection Division. We do a lot of pest detection throughout the entire state, looking at different forest pests and vegetable pests and crop pests. We do a little bit of everything, whether it's a insect, a disease, or a plant pest as well, like invasive plants. So we do a little bit of it all. But today I'll just be talking about some of the insects that could be affecting your woodlands or your trees, wherever you may be. So I'll talk about just a couple species. I'll talk about emerald ash borer, gypsy moth, Asian longhorn beetle, spotted lanternfly, and elongate hemlock scale. So to start with, I will talk about emerald ash borer. I'll try to give the host trees, the life cycle, and kind of where it's been found and distribution for each of the species. So for emerald ash borer, it is native to East Asia. It was first discovered in the US in 2002 in Michigan, and it was first found in Minnesota in 2009 in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. And from there, it has spread out. So I started working on emerald ash borer in 2011. And this will be the life cycle of an emerald ash borer. This previous slide here, that is a kind of a close-up of the adult beetle. You can see that it has the emerald green. It's not as bright green as some insects. A lot of people see the tiger beetle. That's very bright green. This is kind of more of the darker emerald shiny green. And then it has some ruby color underneath on its abdomen, on its underneath the wing covers there. But the life cycle, there's different stages of emerald ash borer present throughout the year. Adult beetles are typically active from about May through September, depending on where you are in the state. In southeast Minnesota, they're going to start emerging earlier in the year, towards that May, June timeframe. And then in northern Minnesota, up in like the Duluth area, it's going to be kind of that June, July that they're going to start emerging. So we have emergence of adult beetles from trees in the summer. The adults, the females, will go do a little bit of feeding on the leaves. Otherwise, they just mate, and then they start laying their eggs on the outside of the bark, in the bark crevices. So on the top right there, you'll see an egg zoomed in very closely there. And the eggs will hatch and they will become a larvae, and the larvae will tunnel underneath the bark. And then the larvae is actually what kills the tree. And the larvae will feed, depending on where you're located in the state. Again, with the growing season in southeast Minnesota, a lot of emerald ash borers can complete their life cycle in 1 year. But in Duluth, we've noticed that a lot of the, and in the more northern areas where we find emerald ash borer infestations, is that they take 2 years to complete their life cycle. So larvae are under the bark for a full 2 years. And then they will chew a little pupal chamber instead of, we see that monarchs make a little chrysalis and cocoon and things. So this insect makes a pupal chamber in the wood where it will develop, and then it'll emerge as a adult beetle, whether it's that year or whether it's the following year or 2 years after that. So at any time there's larvae underneath the bark, cutting off the circulation of nutrients and water, and killing the tree. So emerald ash borer starts an infestation at the top of the tree, usually in the mid to top canopy, and works its way down. And just the buildup of all those larvae underneath the bark is what actually kills the tree. They just work their way down, keep cutting off the circulation of nutrients and water until it's all the way at the base of the tree and surrounding all of the branches and underneath all of the bark. So what does emerald ash borer attack? In Minnesota, we have black ash, green ash, and white ash that occur naturally. And then we have some people that have planted blue ash and Manchurian ash. If you have a mountain ash, it is not a host for emerald ash borer. So that will be one that has the berries on it. But if you have a black, a green, or a white ash, they are susceptible to emerald ash borer. And you can see on the map there that there's black ash in about 2/3 of the state. Green ash is found throughout the state, and then there's typically planted pockets of white ash. White ash are also planted along boulevards many times, as well as the green ash. And on the far right, you can see that there are many different types of cultivars of ash trees that are commonly sold in nurseries. So you'll see that there's a lot of people will have like Marshall seedless ash, which is a type of green ash, or they'll have an autumn purple ash, which is actually a white ash species. So no matter what it's called, it's still basically a black, a green, or a white ash, and it's still going to be impacted by emerald ash borer. So how do you identify it? I kind of described in the first slide that the adult beetles, you can find them sometimes. I have only seen probably a handful of adult beetles at different times at really heavily infested areas. So these trees were standing dead trees that were had been infested for many, many years, which, well, I guess many in the scheme of an emerald ash borer infestation is about 5 to 7 years is probably what they had been infested for. So your odds of seeing an adult beetle, pretty slim, but it does happen. Otherwise, how we usually identify what a tree is infested with emerald ash borer is by finding the S-shaped feeding galleries. So that is underneath the bark. So we peel off some of the bark, and emerald ash borer is the only species attacking ash trees that makes that tight S back and forth shape underneath the bark. We can also use exit holes, but there's a native insect that makes an oval exit hole that looks very, very similar. And I swear the more you stare at the oval shaped hole, it looks like a D. So that's why we suggest putting up a credit card or a card next to it if you see a hole on an ash tree, to use that. And then finding a larva itself. Usually if you peel off the bark, you're going to see the S-shaped gallery first, and then you might find the larva. But in case the gallery doesn't look perfect, you can pick out the larva. And emerald ash borer larvae in ash trees, they are the only ones attacking ash that have the 2 urogomphie on the back end, or like little spine-like projections. They look like little hairs kind of on the back end. They have 2 on that larvae. There are other insects that attack ash trees that are native, that have larvae that do not have these 2 urogomphie on them. So another way to identify if your tree is infested with emerald ash borer is the woodpeckers will eat the larvae underneath the bark. They are very, very tasty, especially in the spring, when the leaves are just starting to come out on the trees. So you're going to look in the branches that are about 3 to 6 inches in diameter, is where they are going to start. Like I said, they start in the mid to top canopy and work their way down. So you look for blonding or like a flaking, kind of a light colored patches in the mid to top canopy. I circled here in red where we'd want you to look. So looking up and not at the base of the tree, at the trunk, look up in those branches. And you can see on the right here, there's, as the woodpecker leaves a hole because it got an emerald ash borer larvae underneath the bark, some of that outer bark has kind of sloughed off. And then it leaves a round or an oval shaped dime-sized light colored hole because the larvae are right underneath the bark. The woodpeckers don't have to go very far to get them. And because they're usually the woodpeckers are usually exploring a little bit. They don't know exactly where the larvae is underneath the bark. They will slough off some of that outer bark that you can see without any assistance from binoculars. And then you can get out your binoculars and look for these dime-sized, light colored, oval-shaped holes. You can also identify it if you have a pair of binoculars by you looking for bark cracks with larval galleries underneath. This is typically in older infestations or in black ash trees. These bark cracks, as the tree calluses off around this larval gallery, the tree will try to heal around that area, and the branch will keep growing. And so you'll get the bark will pop open because it's not held on to the tree anymore. And so it'll pop open and you can see the gallery underneath. So same thing here on the right. It's pretty hard to see, but with a pair of binoculars, you could find it. So where in the United States is emerald ash borer? Well, it is in the eastern and moving into like the Midwest area. It's also going down south. This map was from January, and we haven't had a whole lot of updates to it across the country. The USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, does not regulate emerald ash borer anymore, but we as a state in Minnesota and all the other states individually regulate emerald ash borer per state. And so this is a brand new map as of about an hour ago. We released that a population of emerald ash borer was found down in Freeborn County. So you are one of the first ones to be presented on information that with the newest map. So sadly, emerald ash borer has been spreading out across the state. You can see all of the red counties that have been confirmed by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And then the green areas are what we consider generally infested areas. So you can go onto our website, onto this EAB status map. You can type in your address and you can find out exactly how close a known infested tree is to your location. So you can figure out, should I start doing something with my trees, treating them, thinking about removal, kind of giving you a little heads up with that. So that's what all of these green areas are around here. So slowly it has been spreading out. More recently, it's been kind of some of these southern counties have become infested. Next, I'll talk about gypsy moth. So it is native to Europe, North Africa, South Asia, and Japan. It was first introduced to the US in 1869, and we have been trapping in Minnesota for many years, and we've been doing treatments since 1980. We just wrapped up the treatments for this year last week in the Duluth area. There was we do mating disruption treatments, and we do biological insecticide BTK treatment as well if we find higher populations. And right now, Lake and Cook County are under a quarantine, which is a federal and a state quarantine, which means you cannot bring any wood material. You have to inspect any RV, any equipment, yard equipment that you're moving outside of those counties to make sure they don't have egg masses, which I'll talk about next. So the gypsy moth life cycle, eggs are present starting in like midsummer here, kind of in the July timeframe. Again, southern Minnesota, you're going to see it in that July timeframe. Northern Minnesota and Duluth, you'll kind of see it later on into the August when they start laying their eggs. But you'll have egg masses, which is on the far left picture here, with the little caterpillars emerging from it. But these tan, buff-colored masses, they look like reminds me of like tan Velcro stuck to a tree. You'll see those on the tree. You'll see them underneath picnic benches. You'll see them anywhere. The gypsy moth female will lay her eggs wherever she feels like. Then the eggs will hatch come April and May, and you'll have a larva. There's different stages of larva. You can see that there's teeny tiny little larvae here on the egg masses. And then this picture with the bright blue and red spots is a mature larva. It has 5 pairs of blue dots and 6 pairs of red dots. That is how you identify it. And then the larva will pupate, and it'll make this pupal case here. The kids, I have a couple young kids, and it looks like there's a turd hanging from a tree sometimes when they see them. And then the adult moth will emerge from the pupal case there. And the male moth is the dark colored moth. I call it kind of a blah. It looks like a brownish tan gray moth. Kind of looks like nothing distinct about it. There's no bright colors or anything. The antennae are feathered though. That's how you can tell what it is. And I'll show you on another slide what the identifying characteristics too are. And then the female moth here is a white moth. She does not fly. Her only goal is to mate and lay eggs. The adults are not the ones that do the feeding. It's the larva that does all the feeding that can defoliate the trees. And so what kind of trees does it like? Well, they prefer the oak, aspen, willow, white, and river birch. They also prefer basswood. Some of the other species that all stages of the larva will eat are the hawthorn, hazelnut, hop hornbeam, serviceberry, witch hazel, larch, mountain ash, alder, and apple. And then you have the less preferred species, typically only eaten by the older larvae, which will be yellow birch, box elder, butternut, black walnut, cherry, cottonwood, elm, hackberry, hickory, red, and sugar maple. And they do go for pine and spruce as well. So it's not just deciduous trees, it's coniferous trees as well. And they like blueberries, pin cherry, choke cherry, and sweet fern when they're a larger caterpillar. And then the trees that they typically avoid, ash, which is a good thing, but emerald ash borer is taking care of that for them. Cedar, fir, silver maple, catalpa, mulberry, and many urban species. And dogwood, elderberry, grape, greenbrier, juniper, raspberry, viburnum, and buckthorn. Yay, they avoid buckthorn, but at the same time, I wish they would go for buckthorn because there's plenty of it. It'd be nice if we could train them to prefer buckthorn to help get rid of that. But how to identify a gypsy moth caterpillar? Like I said, there's 5 pairs of blue spots and 6 pairs of red. dots on them. Newly hatched caterpillars are about 1/8 of an inch long. They're hairy and mostly dark brown to black. You can't tell that they have the blue and red spots, but they really do. You just have to look very, very closely. They are very voracious feeders. They can grow up to 2 inches in length. As they grow, their markings become more evident at night, but then migrate down the trunk to the ground each day for protection from the heat and birds. So a lot of times you'll see them moving on the trunks of the tree early in the morning. This is a stage, like I said, that does all the damage. The adult moths don't do any damage to any host plants. And here's how you can identify them. Usually, like I said, the egg masses are that fuzzy buff-colored mass, which are about the size of a quarter. Each egg mass contains between 500 and 1,000 eggs, which will hatch in the next spring. And the females lay their eggs anywhere. On automobile wheel wells, underneath a chair, on a lawnmower, anywhere that's convenient for them. And sometimes it's hard for us to find them because they will hide them on the trunk of a tree, like behind the leaves of another tree that's overhanging it. So it's kind of hard to find them sometimes. And you can, for the most part, identify if you find a pupal chamber or a pupal case, you can identify that it's gypsy moth. But otherwise, the egg mass is typically what we use. The female and male moths can be identified by the comma on both the top and underside of the wings. And so the males, like I said, had those feathery antennae. And then they have this comma that you look for if you find kind of a moth that looks almost like every other moth. And you want to double check just to make sure that it's not gypsy moth. You look for this comma. So how does gypsy moth spread? Well, there's natural dispersal. You have ballooning of the first instar larvae, which are very, very small. They kind of send out these silken threads and try to move that way. And then you have artificial dispersal, which is hitchhiking egg masses. The US distribution currently is all those brown counties have a quarantine in place for gypsy moth. So that is where they have been found reproducing multiple years. And you see that Lake and Cook County are included in Minnesota. And next we have the forest tent caterpillar. This caterpillar, excuse me, I had to take a drink of water. This caterpillar is native to North America. It does not make tents, unlike what its common name suggests. And they typically have a 6 to 10 year boom and crash cycle in Minnesota. Here will be its life cycle. So in April, they emerge from their egg masses, which are typically wrapped around branches of trees. You'll have the caterpillars active, excuse me, in the summer, in May and June. Then you're going to have the cocoon, and you'll have the adult moths flying again, nothing completely distinct or not any bright showy colors or anything to kind of make that moth stand out from other moths. And then in August through March, you're going to have the egg masses back on the branches again. So typically people will find either the caterpillars or the cocoons. You'll see them on log houses, kind of all over on thick bark, on trees, on buildings, on benches, again, kind of like gypsy moth as well, but they're going to be the white filamenty looking webbed kind of cocoons. So the host trees are typically aspen, birch, basswood, and oak are the preferred, and it rarely feeds on spruce, pines, and fir. Adult moths, like I said, lay the eggs in masses that overwinter, and they're usually wrapped around small twigs. You can also count how many you have of these egg masses in an area to predict populations the following year. But typically people are going to see the larval stage of the forest hen caterpillar. It has blue stripes along the sides of its dark hairy body, and it's got white keyhole or footprint shaped spots along its back of its body, and mature caterpillars are about 2 to 2.5 inches in length. And then again, identifying, you can use their silk cocoons that they use to attach to vegetation, buildings, and other objects from early to late June. It's not a tent, but it's just a light colored webbing compared to gypsy moth caterpillar. Gypsy moth egg masses are going to be that tan color. These forest tent caterpillar silk cocoons are usually misidentified as gypsy moth caterpillar egg masses. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out what you're seeing. And there are outbreaks in Minnesota every about 6 to 10 years of forest tent caterpillars, but they're some naturally occurring controls that regulate it. Cold or damp springs, starvation, and viral disease all reduce their numbers, and wasps and flies can grow inside forest tent caterpillar eggs, larvae, and pupa that consume them, or that parasitize these forest tent caterpillars. So an example is a large gray fly, which is shown here in the picture. It is native to Minnesota. Populations of the fly will collapse due to starvation. But when there are high populations of forest tent caterpillars, there will be large populations of these large gray flies. So they kind of balance each other out and limit the long-term damage on the trees, because the caterpillars do defoliate the trees. So one of the coniferous pests would be the Elongate hemlock scale. We have not found an established population in Minnesota. However, we have intercepted them in typically during the holiday greenery season in the fall of 2019, and then also in 2020, we did intercept trees and boughs and other holiday greenery that was coming in from outside of the Minnesota that had these scales on them. So they are native to Japan, and they were first observed in 1908 in Queens, New York, and are commonly, or I shouldn't say commonly, but they are found kind of on the eastern coast of the US, which we'll see here in a minute or two. So how do you identify elongate hemlock scale? They're usually on the underside of the needles. They have a crawler stage that disperses by wind or by birds. They're able to reproduce on 43 different species of trees, and they prefer the firs and the spruce. Signs of elongate hemlock scale typically include yellow banding on the top of infested needles and premature needle drop. So if you're seeing these like dark spots on the underside of the needles, it could be a type of scale. We do have some scales that are found in Minnesota that are not elongate hemlock scale. So if you ever run across that, please by all means send us a picture and some information. So here's where elongate hemlock scale has been known to occur. I know this map is a little old, but it's the only one that we could find. So you can see that it's in New York, in Pennsylvania, up in the northeast area. You also have it in North Carolina, Virginia, and down kind of growing in that area as well. Next, we have Asian longhorn beetle. So this has not been found in Minnesota. It is native to Eastern China, Japan, and Korea. First US find was in 1996, and there's a serious infestation in Ohio, which is pretty close when you think about these insects could fly and move quite easily, and recently found in South Carolina. So the host plants, they prefer maples and willow, which we in Minnesota, if it's kind of not an ash tree on your property, it's probably a maple of some type on your property. We have lots and lots of maple, both in urban environments and in the natural environment as well. We also have aspen, birch, and elm. There are some other ones, including box elder, buckeye, horse chestnut, mountain ash, cottonwood, and ash trees as well. But we kind of highlight that this one is one that would go for maple trees. So how do we identify it? If you have a thinning crown, you also want to look for exit holes and frass building up. So these larvae are quite large. They kind of make Swiss cheese of the tree. So they'll send out a lot of frass or kind of the sawdust on the right here. If you see a lot of sawdust around a maple tree, and then you see these egg pits. So the adult beetles will actually chew little spots that they lay their eggs in. That would be a sign of an emerald or Asian longhorn beetle infestation. And so where is it in the United States? Well, there's populations in Illinois, or I should say, there were populations in Illinois. They've been eradicated. Ohio has both had populations eradicated and current ones. Like I said, that South Carolina one. The Northeast area has had a lot of eradication. So the USDA does have an eradication program for Asian longhorn beetle, where they will come in and remove all of the host trees in an area to try to reduce the population and get it out of the area, and then continue with trapping and other means to stop its spread. So that program works pretty well for that species of insect. Different management programs are used for each different species, depending on their life cycle and how the infestation spreads. And then I will talk about here the spotted lanternfly. So this is a new one, not found in Minnesota, but has been found in 11 states. So this one was new a couple of years ago in Pennsylvania in 2014. It's native to China, India, Japan, and Vietnam. And there's not really anything in Minnesota that looks close to this. So it's if you see something like this that has the spots and like the TV fuzz kind of looking, then definitely let us know. It uses piercing, sucking mouth parts to feed on the sap from over 70 different plant species. Tree of Heaven is one of its preferred hosts, which we don't have in Minnesota. Tree of Heaven is actually, I believe, on the noxious weed list. So we shouldn't have any here in Minnesota. But we do have lots of grapevines that just are naturally occurring in forested areas and in the urban environment. And again, with the maple trees as a host plant and black walnut. The feeding damage that these insects do can significantly stress the plants, which can lead to decreased health and potentially death. So there is a lot of stress kind of put on this because of the grapevines. So the wineries and vineyards are really interested in making sure that this insect doesn't become a major pest in Minnesota. And so here are the different stages of the life cycle. You'll have egg masses. They're kind of like they kind of look like putty almost, like a grayish tan color. Again, on the trunks of trees, kind of anywhere. And then you have the early nymph, which is this cute little black and white insect. And then you have kind of a later nymph where you have this striking red color, not to be confused with box elder bugs or some of the milkweed beetles, but this bright red with, again, with the white spots and still the black markings. And then you have the adults with the wing closed. And with the wings open, the adults kind of do look like one of the moth species that we do have here in Minnesota that has the kind of pink underwing. But when it's closed and just crawling around, you'll see that it's about an inch long and has those spots in the black areas as well. Like I call it the TV fuzz. So again, here's closer up, kind of more detailed. It does have that yellow underneath the wings on the abdomen with the black bands. So that would be what you'd look for. The egg masses you might find again. Egg masses are kind of are sometimes easy to spot if they're in an area where you wouldn't be expecting them at all, like on a picnic bench or something. But these ones are kind of harder to see because they're going to match the bark a lot more than the forest tent caterpillars or even the gypsy moth egg masses. So these are going to be pretty close to the bark color. And then where it could potentially become established. So this would be just the potential distribution. In Minnesota, based on our temperature and our cold winters that we get, they ran some models to see where in the United States spotted lanternfly could become established. And it looks like in kind of just in these red areas in these states, probably not into Minnesota, but there is still a potential. Just because an insect won't survive outside the winter doesn't mean that it couldn't find a way into a shelter or into a building or someplace to be protected from the winter and become established in Minnesota, especially with with some people growing grapes in the southeast Minnesota area. And so just to end, I know that was a lot to cover in a short amount of time, quickly going through a lot of different species on how to recognize it and how to identify it and what to look for, where it is. Please don't ever hesitate to contact us. You can use the Great Lakes Early Detection Network app. It's a smartphone app that you can download on your iPhone or Android phone that you can report in any aquatic or terrestrial invasive species that you may see. You can also visit our website. Pretty soon we're going to have an online form that you can fill out and attach pictures to really easily. But right now we just have a website with an email address and a phone number. If you do give us a call, please give us kind of a detailed message and what you are seeing, where it is located. And if you can, please always take pictures and take notes. We can tell a lot, especially for insects, if we have pictures. We can at least get close to at least a group or a family of insects or even a genus of insects as well. And if you have any further questions about all the species that I talked about, like I said, Angie Amborn is our entomologist, and she would be happy to answer some of those.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, for all that wonderful information. I will moderate the question and answer session now. And at this time, since we don't have too many people on the call, I invite people to unmute their mics if they want to ask a question verbally or live. The first question, though, that we do have in the chat box is, I know you can't move firewood from county to county, but can you bring freshly cut aspen or maple poles for a tent into Minnesota from Northwest Wisconsin?
Good question. I want to say all of Wisconsin is quarantined for emerald ash borer right now, so you wouldn't be able to bring anything in. Let me go back.
Jennifer, I think you are muted if you are speaking. Jennifer, I just wanted to say that I think you are muted. Okay. That is weird. I don't know, Jennifer, if you can type, if you can still hear me.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Wrong button. I got on quick.
Right.
So, yes, let me just look here quick. I want to say the whole state of Wisconsin is quarantined. So unless you were to come into Duluth, you wouldn't be able to. You can move between counties that are quarantine. So like if you were in like Ramsey County and Hennepin County and you want to move back and forth, you can do that. However, it does say that the entire state of Wisconsin is quarantined. So legally you can't bring any wood in from Wisconsin unless you have a compliance agreement, which if you're just doing it for a day is not going to be worth the effort for that.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I see that Tirtha, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible to you?
Mm-hmm.
Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to ask a question to Jennifer that you have showed lots of forest waste in that presentation. And can you tell me, or do you know about this, that how many types of pests in the woodland are there, or is there any importance of forest pest in the ecosystem of the woodland?
You're asking if there are like more kind of forest pests. So these are just a few that are kind of invasive, and if their populations grow, could really negatively impact your forest land. There are a lot of native pests. There's actually a really thick book on all the different insect pests, and another really thick book that is all the different disease pests that affect wood, that affect trees in general. But with these are kind of the new and potentially more harmful pests that are not native to the US that would be affecting your woodlands.
Okay, but in the Minnesota, is there any, I mean, how many types of these insects or host plants or these forest pests are there? Yeah, by approximately or any research?
On how many are present?
Yeah.
There are a couple different research groups that have looked at just general identification of insect pests in the certain areas. So I know like the Cedar Creek, University of Minnesota, Cedar Creek environmental site has done kind of a bio blitz on insect population. So they have cataloged all of the insects that they have found at Cedar Creek, but I don't have I wouldn't even be able to give you a good estimate of a number. The U.S. Forest Service and there's a couple of researchers at the University of Minnesota that would probably have a better understanding of that. So Stephen Katovich at the U.S. Forest Service, and then Robert Vanette at the University of Minnesota would also have more information on the numbers and of insect pests and their different host species.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
May I? Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know that's always a tough question to ask. There's always points of contention with having a number exactly as well. We have another question in the chat. This person has a balsam fir, 60 to 70 feet tall, 4 feet, 6-inch diameter, and it's going from green to brown in about 3 months. Do you have any idea on what might have killed it?
Good question. I wouldn't know without seeing it. However, some of the comments that have been made by other foresters, I know there's a lot of DNR has a lot of forestry staff that would probably be able to help you identify exactly what's going on with it. But some of the things we have seen, because it's kind of highlighted this year, is because of the drought. Just low precipitation for multiple years here has really impacted the species, all tree species. So that could be something. But if you want, you can reach out to either the Arrest the Pest. I triage all those emails. So you can email that to Arrest the Pest. And I can get you in contact with the DNR foresters that are probably in your area if you provide me a location. They have a better sense. The DNR foresters have a better sense of what's going on regionally, whereas with the Department of Agriculture, we kind of cover the whole state, so they kind of know more hands-on what's going on in certain areas.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else at this time have a question that would like to ask it via microphone?
Excuse me, host, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Actually, I want to say something about off topic. That is it possible for you that to send us these presentation slide through mail?
Yes, so I can send you the slides. So we actually are recording this right now, and so I will send a link to the recording.
Yeah, thank you. But it will be more effective for me if you send me this over my mail.
Okay, is that okay, Jennifer, to send the slides out, or?
Okay,
I should be able to. I can double check on it. It's typically okay. I just have to check on some of the pictures that we use just to make sure that we have permissions to share them. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. So we will be in touch with the slides for this.
And I know I didn't cover a whole lot on management. I don't know if there's people interested in kind of hearing some of the management options. For emerald ash borer, I can talk about that.
Yes, if you would like, for sure.
Unless there's any other questions. Otherwise, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has a handout. It's called, actually a couple different handouts. The Homeowner's Guide to Insecticide Use. So if you have some prized ash trees that you would like protected from emerald ash borer, using that map that is found on our website, you can see how close it is. You can determine if you should start treating or if you should think about start treating your tree or not, if you want to keep it. But as of right now, there is no one thing that is going to wipe out emerald ash borer. So we can kind of have a lot of things in our toolbox, and between a combination of them, kind of slow the spread and flatten the curve, not to pull from COVID, but it's been nice to see, if everybody remembers back last year when they said flatten the curve for COVID, same kind of population dynamic happens for emerald ash borer. You're going to get that exponential growth. And so using different management tools, we can slow the decline of the ash trees in an area and spread it out over a longer period of time so it's more manageable. So the same thing, like I said, between COVID and emerald ash borer, you can see the same kind of graphs. So treatment is one of them. Removing trees that are infested in the winter is also another thing that you can do. If it's not a tree that you want to keep around and treat, I would suggest removing it before it becomes completely dead and really hazardous. Ash trees become very, very brittle when they die, and they just start dropping their branches and could potentially fall on private property or other property and cause lots of damage. So we do like to suggest people removing trees in the winter when the larvae are not active, or when the adult beetles are not active. So it's only the larvae underneath the bark. And then you process. You can have a big bonfire, burn the tree once it's removed, or chip it and use it as wood chips to make sure those larvae don't start emerging. So that's kind of the different management. We also have a guidelines to slow the spread of emerald ash borer, or to slow the growth and spread of emerald ash borer. And it kind of goes in more detail depending on where you're located in the state. If you do not have emerald ash borer yet in your county, what should you be thinking about? And then if you have it in your county but not in your city, what should you be thinking about at that point? And then if it's in your city, what your options are and kind of what different suggestions would be and where to find information. So those are all available on our main emerald ash borer website.
Great, thank you. One question I had is, are there less invasive species up north due to the temperatures? I know I saw gypsy moth seemed like it could spread in northern Minnesota. So is there a major difference, or?
It depends on the life cycle of the species. So over time, you kind of get the populations that are going to be more cold hardy, survival of the fittest. So that gypsy moth has been kind of blowing in across from Wisconsin. Same thing with emerald ash borer, it kind of blew in from Wisconsin into the Duluth area, and then is spreading there. Duluth is kind of a unique spot because it's actually closer to the North Shore, is actually closer to the Twin Cities metro temperature wise, and in that sense. But once you kind of get over the big hill, you really drops off and you get that really cold up there. So there's other pests that are coming in from Canada. There's some that are coming in from like Western Canada that could potentially come down into Minnesota. And then there's more that are gradually moving more northern and becoming more cold hardy. So the university does a lot of research on the cold hardiness of different species because Minnesota has such that wide range of growing zones.
Mhm. All right, thank you. And if nobody has any questions, that can conclude the webinar. I'll just give maybe one more minute if anybody wants to say something via mic. All right, it doesn't sound like that. So thank you, Jennifer, for this really helpful talk. I will be sending out a recording in the next few days, and that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Nikki Hanger, for your nice anchoring. And I'll be very glad if you send me that presentation slide through my mail.
Yes, of course, we will be in touch. Thank you all.
Thank you.